Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly discussion with people from the area about things that affect us as people of faith. My guest this morning is one who's very familiar to many of you who are familiar with the show, and that's Aaron Brown, who's the lead pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. Aaron, it's good to have you back with us this morning. And we are going to be talking a little bit about some of the notion of religious pilgrimage, and a pilgrimage actually that Aaron was fortunate enough to go on recently, and we're going to be talking about that when we get back. Before I forget about it though, I want to make sure that if any of you have any ideas for shows, you can contact us on Facebook now, Faith in Our Hometown on Facebook. Please look for us. If you've got great story ideas, please send them to us so that we can do that. But we continue to meet every week and to broadcast on Sundays so that we can kind of present to folks in the area a few things to perhaps think about. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. So stay tuned, and we're going to be right back with Aaron Brown. Stay tuned.
From childhood, whenever I was about 12, I would say, my weight really started climbing, and it never really plateaued. I've tried low-carb diets, high-protein diets. I've tried calorie diets. It's very important to Dr. Lou that this is a team effort, so a primary care doctor following up with me regularly. And the dietitian was very helpful on providing recipes and helpful information to help me be successful in my journey. I'm very active and I play sports with the kids. We like to go play volleyball. I've done some warrior dashes.
Well, thanks for staying tuned. Again, my guest this morning is Aaron Brown. Aaron is the lead pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist. Aaron, it's good to have you with us again.
Always good to be here.
We were talking a little bit, before we got started about the nature of religious pilgrimage, that's an ancient practice to sometimes leave where you're familiar with and go somewhere else to get in touch with something else. And recently you've made a chance to make a religious pilgrimage to the Holy Land. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, interesting that you use that word pilgrimage, and I'm not super familiar with what the word literally means, but what I experienced was taking myself from where I am to a place that has these deep religious roots for me. And I didn't know what to expect. And I kind of was, the journey that I had to the Holy Land was a gift from my church. I'd been at St. Paul's for 20 years, and it was a gift that they'd given me to be able to do that.
Great
gift. Yeah, it's something that I always planned on doing and thought I would do someday, but never really actually got around to making arrangements for. Because, you're busy, and in the Middle East is one of those places like, maybe I'll wait a little longer.
Exactly.
I'll wait a little longer. Wait a little longer. You can wait a long time.
Waiting for peace. Yeah, that's what I always tell myself. I want things to get a little more settled, but
no, it's not going to happen. But so for me, it was that okay, now's the time. In fact, I actually had a seminary friend who organizes trips, and so I ended up being swept along in that. It was one of those moments where this is the right time, this is the right place, these are the right people to go with.
But did you take any folks from here in Joplin with you?
I did not. Yeah,
so that's always an interesting way to do it too, because I've done that, but we like, for example, Rome and places in Italy, religious sites in Italy.
I'd love to go there.
But that's when you organize it for as a pilgrimage from your parish. But you just went with this other group of folks that you were not connected with.
I didn't know any of them except the organizer a little bit from way back in seminary. So going to Israel and Palestine, one of the things that people who have been, well, they'll tell you, and I experienced this in the extremes. So some people told me, oh my gosh, it'll be one of the holiest things you'll ever do. You'll never be the same. It'll be this incredible experience. And then other people say, oh, Aaron, you're going to be so disappointed. It's so commercialized or overdone or, fill in the blank. And so I'm like, well, probably the best thing that I could do was to enter into this pilgrimage just neutral and just to let happen what happened. And one of the holy sites, of my spiritual history, from Abraham's entrance into the area of Dan up north, and then of course the birth sites of Christ and the birth site of Christ in Bethlehem, and then Nazareth, and just the Sea of Galilee. But all those areas have these deep holy meanings in my mind, but I've never pictured them in such detail.
Right.
And some of them were really pastoral and beautiful and rural, but the key spots in the Christian faith, Bethlehem, where Christ was born, and then in Jerusalem and Golgotha, where Christ was crucified. I mean, those are very, I don't know the right words, built up places. Right. I mean, they were little shrines that became little churches, that became gigantic churches that were destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed and rebuilt.
Right. Over
the course of 2,000 years. So for me, like in Bethlehem, it was one of those experiences. It was like a combination of heaven and Silver Dollar City all rolled into one.
Not a bad way of describing, I think, some of that. Now, I've never been to the Holy Land, but certainly I would say the same thing about any of the pilgrimage sites.
We should do it. We should go.
Yeah. Well, it'd be kind of a fun trip between St. Peter's and St. Anne's and St. Paul's.
All the saints.
It'd be great. It's Peter and Paul. How can we go wrong with that?
Mary.
There we go. It's just like, there we go. It's all good. So, but I mean, in terms of that, there is a tension in some of those places because, again, some of them were just, I mean, obviously they don't look anything what they looked like back then because of all the things that have happened in those particular spots since then. But but there's still something there when and I think that as a preacher especially, that had to be very touching to just be in some ways standing in some of those spots where, and again, folks, if you've never been on a pilgrimage, in a lot of these instances, there's what they call like a reliability factor, and they'll tell you, okay, this one probably really did happen here, and this one, we're not so sure. Right. But you've mentioned most of the ones that have stayed for 2,000 years now as religious pilgrimage sites, because people have always been visiting those from the very beginning.
Right. And what's interesting about, for example, the Church of the Nativity, where it's a large church complex. It's built over the small cave where they believe that Christ was born. The stable being probably more than likely this cave. And one of the ways that this site was preserved was one of the Roman emperors destroyed it, wanted to wipe the holy site away completely, but he built a shrine to Jupiter, the god Jupiter, right there, and that actually preserved the site because people, for many, many centuries would say, yeah, that shrine for Jupiter, but we all know that's where it used to be a church for celebrating the birth of Christ. So all those kinds of things where there's overlap and in attempts to destroy holy sites actually preserved some of them, not all of them.
Yeah. And so of all the things that you saw, what was the one that was like the most touching to you? Which one got to you the most?
Of the holy sites, there's the place. It's called Peter Primacy Church, and it's on the Sea of Galilee. And this is the site where after the resurrection, so Jesus has been crucified, he's dead, he's come back, but his disciples in the meantime have gone back to their jobs. A lot of them were fishermen, so they're out there fishing. Peter, James, and John are back on the Sea of Galilee. They don't know what else to do with their lives. The guy they were following's gone, so what do? Let's go back to fishing. Well, Jesus goes to the edge of the lake shore of the Sea of Galilee is actually a lake, and he's there, and they're out there fishing, and he calls to them, and they come to the shore. He's cooked breakfast for them.
He's messing with them. Is what he's doing.
He is, but that's the place where he talks to Peter specifically, because Peter has denied knowing Jesus 3 times, and it's at that place where Jesus asks Peter, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, I love you. And then again, Peter, do you love me? Yes, you know that I love you. Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you. And then each time Peter says, yeah, I love you. Jesus says, well, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And for me, as a pastor, that was a very powerful moment. To hear those words again and feel like, they kind of were words for me. That was one of my most moving moments, kind of to affirm myself, having been in ministry, 25 years, and to hear those words at that kind of a point in time, it meant a lot to me. I was very moved at that place in particular.
Yeah, one of my parishioners many years ago, not from that particular site, but from another site where Peter was, they were on pilgrimage, and this is the one where right after Jesus is again asking his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter's the one that finally, well, they're saying this, they're saying that, they're saying the other thing, and then finally says, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter makes his confession of faith, his profession of faith at that point in time. And so this woman, she said, "I just had to bring you something," and so she brought me this rock. And so there in the front office there at St. Peter's, we've got this rock sitting right next to this little image of Peter. And again, it's just it's a touchstone. It's it's something that connects us. Now, do I know that he stepped on that? No, I don't know any of those things. But it's from that place, and as these things have been passed down to us, these places become special because that's where people went back to remember those stories. That's one of for us, one of those things about being on pilgrimages is that again, you try to put yourself back in the footsteps of where Jesus lived and walked, who he talked to, the stories that we still have passed down, all those things. And especially for Christians, and of course in that area, also our Jewish ancestors in the faith, same thing you're talking about Abraham, those are ways for us to kind of connect with the roots of who we are.
And that was another important spot for me that I didn't predict. For the Jewish faith and in Islam and in Christianity, Abraham is the key, central beginning point in so many ways of those faiths. And
we're all cousins, whether we like to admit it or not.
We are cousins. But Abraham came down from the land of Ur into the land of Palestine, and there really is only one way to do that, and it's through this ancient city of Dan, which they've unearthed. And the city is about 10,000 years old. And there are these gates that they've just unearthed not too long ago, really, that are the gates to the city of Dan. And so, around 4,000 years ago, 3,800 years ago, Abraham would have walked through those gates. And for me, that was also a powerful moment, is that, these stones were here 10,000 years ago. Abraham walked through here, between 3,800 and 4,000 years ago. And somehow my life as a follower of Jesus is connected to this man that walked through this place that long ago. And there's this thing in my mind of like, how am I connected to that? How many hundreds, thousands of people made decisions, made sacrifices, made choices that led to me in Joplin, Missouri, saying, I'm a follower of Jesus, who was the Son of God, who was proclaimed by the prophet, the prophets and Moses and Abraham. You have such a sense of time that you don't have always in your. That's why pilgrimage is so important.
Well, it does. It just kind of changes our perspective on some of those things. When you start looking at this, this reality of all these people that have gone before us, and we stand on the shoulders of all of those folks. I find it absolutely fascinating. We're here with Aaron Brown this morning, talking a little bit about the notion of a religious pilgrimage. Aaron was blessed to have visited, the Holy Land. What at least Christians and Jews and Muslims would probably all call the Holy Land in different ways and for different reasons. But in that context, we are talking a little bit about the notion of religious pilgrimage. So in a minute, we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll continue our discussions. So please don't go away. Thanks for joining us this morning. Stay tuned.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, thanks for sticking with us this morning. Again, our guest, Aaron Brown, pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist, and we've been talking about his trip to the Holy Land, and kind of how those moments of religious pilgrimage change us. So one of the things was, actually going on journey, on seeking something. So did you have anything in mind when you sought, when you left, or were you just kind of I'm going to be a blank canvas and see what was going to happen?
I think partly it was blank canvas.
Okay.
But partly it was affirmation, I think, and to see these places to connect in a way that, as a speaker, communicator, preacher for 25 years, to be able to say, this is where this happened, and to know. One of those places, it's actually a trail. It's called the Jesus Trail from the area of Capernaum to Nazareth. That if you live in those two areas, you travel this. There's only one way to get from here to there, and to know that Jesus, as a kid, as a young, as a teenager, as a young man, would have traveled this area back and forth between these communities in this area over and over and over again. And so those sorts of things to me were transformative, and I don't know what it is just about not just a place but a trail.
Right. That those were his footsteps were on that trail, especially when there's only one.
There's only
and
one.
we know, from our biblical stories, they did travel that route, and so by doing that, placing your footsteps in the footsteps of a person you believe in, again, just kind of like one of those. Those moments I'm sure seem kind of surreal, but at the same time, I'm sure is edifying and kind of challenging. I would bet.
Right. In so many different ways. One of the challenges I faced was, it seems kind of mundane when I say it out loud, but just to recognize our arrogance in the 21st century.
Wow.
We think we're pretty smart, and we are, human beings, but 3,000 years ago, they were carving stones that weighed 15, 20, 30 tons. I couldn't carve a stone. I wouldn't know where to begin. But they were able to carve stones, keep them square, and transport them, and build gigantic things out of them.
And this is without engines. This is without
hydraulics.
Exactly.
But what I came away with thinking about that is like, they were smart people. They were very smart people. Okay. And so kind of a humbling to say, here in the 21st century, we can do a lot of things. But 3 centuries ago, 5 centuries ago, people were doing some pretty amazing things then too. And so there's this compelling part of me too, like, wow, I would love to have, if I could have a time machine, go back and see how this wall was built. The wall around Jerusalem, parts of it are original. I mean, not many parts of it, but parts of it are original. And so there are stones that were set there 3,000 years ago. And they're the size of a small bus.
And they're still solid, the way they built it.
And so that was one of those revelations too of the human mind, the human capacity for creativity, and then on the other side of that coin, the human capacity for violence and destruction and relegating people to non-human states.
Let's talk about that for a second. So you went to one of the areas that is arguably one of the most unsettled in our contemporary age, in terms of a disagreement as to how people should be getting along and living in an area that is special to so many people. So what did you learn about that whole conflict? What did you learn about some of the struggles in that area?
I'll kind of start from the
sure,
tail end
start
of
wherever
that,
you want, yeah.
Because one of the last places we went to was the Holocaust Museum, the Holocaust Remembrance Museum. And I don't know that I've experienced anything as deeply moving as that, or many things as deeply moving as that in my life. And so the Jewish state and that Jewish identity is so powerful in large part, and this is my opinion, because of what the Jews went through in the Holocaust and in the 30s and 40s and prior to that as well. But to see the footage of how the Jews were dehumanized and ghettoized and is powerful, and I guess gave me a little bit of insight as to why they fight so fiercely for their national identity. Right. The irony in that, though, is that I also saw how the Israelis often treat the Palestinians in a very similar way, that they get relegated to less than second-class citizens or third-class citizens and relegated to areas that continue to be eaten away. And it was heartbreaking to see that full circle, that they're so defensive of their national identity that they're actually doing to others, in my opinion, what was done to them in many ways.
Yeah. And it's a real challenge. I think, when someone has been through something that horrific, the real challenge is not to lose their humanity, either while it's happening or when they're on the other side of it. Yeah. And I think that's a very it's just still a sad reality that we seem to struggle with some of the human issues that you'd think we'd have been able to figure out a way to to get to. And theoretically, sometimes we do, but in the practicality of that, I still think it's a struggle for us to be fully human and to treat each other fully human, even when we have some fundamental disagreements.
A lot of it's based on fear, and I saw some of that. One of the things you talk about Palestine, there's still refugee camps in Palestine and Israel. From 1948 and from the 60s, refugee camps. Now they're not tents and they're that sort of thing, they're buildings, but the people who live in refugee camps are reminded that they're still refugees. And one of the things that we actually visited the refugee camp, one of them, and they only have running water in the refugee camp, and talking 30, 40, 50,000 people that live there. I don't have running water one day every 20 days for 6 hours. And the interesting part is they're on the same water grid as the entire country of Israel. And that's just a simple reminder, you're refugees. It's not because there's not water or infrastructure to carry it, or it's just a reminder, you're refugees. You're not real.
You don't have the same rights.
Same access here. And to see that, I think that was probably my first realization. Wow, that this isn't what I had in my mind about what Israel and Palestine are, and we hear about the two-state solution. How can the Palestinians have their own sovereign state, and Israel have its own sovereign state? It's simply not possible in the current setting.
Well, and again, I know that we're, it's still something that many people are still trying to help broker that thing. I mean, even recently, President Trump has said, I want to try to broker that deal. I want to try to be able to do that. And it's one of those things that I would cheer him on for, because if that deal could be brokered, and I don't care who brokers it, if we can get people to figure out a few more steps in that direction, I think the world is going to be a whole lot better off, and certainly the Israelis and the Palestinians. But again, that means that both sides are going to have to give up something. And sometimes sides don't want to give up something. They want to hang on to the either the pain or the suffering or whatever, and if they cannot let go of that to where they can give up something, if neither one of those things, so if the Palestinians can't give up and recognize Israel's right to exist, and if Israel can't recognize the need for a place of refuge for their other brothers, then we're never going to get to a point where they can move forward.
Right,
and that's sad.
It's sad, and there's a great deal of fear involved in those decisions that affect everything. So from what I encountered there, I think that a two-state solution is gone. It is dead. It will never happen.
Wow.
Because there's so many Israeli settlements in the West Bank and in the Palestinian territories, and not little settlements of 5 families or 10 families, or we're talking again 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people in Jewish settlements in West Bank areas, and it's just not possible for those to be removed at any point. So anyway, I don't know the answers. I don't know the solutions. I think when people, whenever humans dehumanize other humans for whatever reason, we're in trouble. And that happened to the Jews in so many ways, and continues to happen. Happens to Palestinians, Muslims, people in their fear begin to dehumanize others.
Right, and and I do not think that is. I don't care which of our theologies you look at. I don't care which of our scriptures you look at. I don't think that's God's idea at all.
Yeah.
I don't think that's God's idea at all. I think that's been, unfortunately, our inability to grasp God's idea. and put it into an effective enough practice that we can do something about those things. Yeah. Rick, we've got a minute left here, but what would you say you took away from the final thought on what you took away from your pilgrimage?
Sinus infection.
Okay.
No, okay.
That was profound.
Yeah. I took away a sense of the word that I keep coming back to is layers. The layers of the faith story of Christianity and Judaism and Islam, the layers of that, and how those layers are built upon one another, how those layers interact with each other, and in the future, how those layers are still going to be there. You scratch the surface a little bit, and there's more. Yeah. There's still more to understand. So, and I guess I found some layers in myself too in that journey. That's what a pilgrimage is all about. It isn't just about seeing things.
Well, good.
It's about experiencing yourself.
Well, we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Stay tuned.
Find out how a Mercy doctor can take care of you. At Mercy, your life is our life's work. Quality, safety, and an exceptional patient experience. Mercy is grateful to be recognized as one of the top 15 health systems in the United States. At Mercy, your life is our life's work.
Well, thanks again for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning was Aaron Brown, who's the lead pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist. Aaron, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
We've been talking this morning a little bit about the nature of religious pilgrimage and how it's supposed to take us from one spot to another spot. And that somehow we get transformed and changed during that journey. Aaron was blessed to share with us some of those ways about walking in the footsteps of Jesus and the way that was in some ways transformative. But one of the most challenging things that he reminded all of us of is that as people of faith, we still don't always get it right. As people of faith, sometimes we who are supposed to be the humanizing agents for God sometimes wind up not doing it the way that we should. That was probably the most heart-wrenching part of that spiritual journey for me as you talked about it, Aaron. So thank you for sharing with us this morning. Thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. It is important that we keep our hearts open to whatever it is that God seems to take us on, whatever kind of a journey it is and was and will be, those layers you were talking about. So thanks for joining us. Come back and see us again next week for another episode of Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.